A person invests $8,000 at 10% interest, compounded annually. Let f of t be the value of the account at t years after being deposited. A. Find the equation of f. B. What is the base b of your model f of t equals ab to the t? What does it mean? C. What is the coefficient a and what does it mean in this situation? And D. What will the account value be in 8 years? So I highly recommend you read board problems at least 2 to 3 times. So let's try one more. A person invests $8,000 at 10% interest compounded annually. And we're to use f of t to be the value of the account at t years after being deposited. So let's realize our exponential function equation is typically of the form f of x equals ab to the x. Agreed? But in this case, we're going to start with an equation that's slightly different, but we will end up with exactly something similar to that. So a equals p times, in parentheses, 1 plus r divided by n, all raised to the power of n times t. So those are exponents, n and t. Something to be aware. If you have a hard time finding an equation, keep in mind, there are other places where you can search for equations, right? Such as, for instance, Google. We would Google, in this case, let's see, compounded interest formula, and you should get something similar to this. So in this case, A represents the amount after time t, P is the initial amount, R is the rate in decimal form, and T is time. So let's see, in this case, let's not forget N. N is the number of times compounded. As a reference, for instance, if you're counting this yearly, but it's stated as it's compounded monthly, then you have 12 for your N value, because it's compounded 12 times per year. So it's the number of times it's compounded per your rate of time. So P is the initial amount. In this case, we're investing $8,000. So if you have $8,000 to spare and you want to invest it at 10% interest, your initial amount, P, is 8,000. R is the rate, but keep in mind it's in decimal form. So that means we're going to divide it by 100. So in this case, we have 10%. And we're dividing it by 100. So 10 divided by 100 gives us 0.10, right? Or just 0.1, depending on how you prefer to write it. I write it as 0.10. That way we can see the decimal place location. Time, well, it's per year, right? So we're doing this per year, and we're going to assume this is compounded once per year. So we're going to say n equals 1 for this particular case then. In many cases, that will be the case. You assume that it's once per year. But otherwise, they'll tell you specifically, if you're counting it yearly, about compounding it monthly, then you'd say n is 12 and put a 12 in for the n. So A, in this case, our equation then reads A equals 8,000, that was our initial investment, times, in parentheses, 1 plus, 10% as a decimal form, 0.01 or 0.10, I should say, divided by 1, number of times compounded per year, raised to the power of the n value, which is 1 times t. And we can simplify this. Notice, the 1 on the t, 1 times t, is just t, so we can omit the 1. 0.1 divided by 1 gives us 0.1, plus 1 gives us 1.1. So, in a sense, there is our simplification and also our final equation. F of t equals 8,000 times 1.1 raised to the power of t. So this is our final equation. So we found our equation. A has been answered. B, what is the base b of your model f of t equals ab to the t, and what does it mean? The base value v. Look at our equation that we just found. F of t equals 8,000 times 1.1 raised to the power of t. 1.1 is the v value in this case. So the v value, b equals 1.1, and since it's a bigger number than 1, we can expect exponential growth. So that means we have exponential growth in this case, meaning we're gonna have a gain in our investment. If you borrowed money, for instance, from the bank at 10% interest, that means you're losing money, right? In other words, you're paying the amount by 10% per year. Okay, let's go to Z. C, what is the coefficient and what does it mean in this situation? Notice it has it in red. That's because we've already completed that one by accident. Well, not quite accident, but by choice. A is P up at the top. P is the initial amount. So the initial amount was $8,000. So there's our answer for C. A is the initial amount, 8,000. And it's basically what we started with. So D, what will the account value be in 8 years? So it's a matter of substitution. So replacing the T value, in other words, f of 8. F of 8 equals 8,000 times 1.1 raised to the power of 8. We're doing 8 years, right? So do remember, this might be a calculator problem from here on, but otherwise you can do it in steps. You can go 1.1 by order operation, you have to do exponents first. So we can't multiply yet. We can multiply the 8,000, I should say. So it's 1.1 to the power of 8, or 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1, etc. I recommend you practice with your calculator though. So calculator real quick. Turn on your calculator. Okay, turn on a calculator. Let's clear it out. Now let's realize that we have 8,000. We can do all fully in our calculators in this case. 1, 2, 3 zeros, 8,000 times 1.1. I could put parentheses, but I don't really need parentheses in this case. Your calculator understands this quite well because you're putting the multiplication sign. So 8,000 times 1.1, caret key underneath your clear button is your caret key, so push the caret key. If you have a T84, it erases it up automatically for you. Put an 8 and hit enter. So there it is. Our estimated growth or value is $17,148 and roughly 71 cents. So let's copy that onto our paper. F of 8 equals, once again, we want to go to the nearest cents because we're talking about money, right? So two decimal places. $17,148 with 71 cents is how much we can expect to receive back. Notice that this includes the $8,000 we initially put in. So we're getting back nearly double the amount after 8 years if we're investing it at 10% interest rate. Do remember though, if you borrowed, that means you're paying more than double of what you originally borrowed. Agreed? So do keep that in mind. And for instance, credit cards, well, credit cards are not necessarily compounded regularly. It's more of a continuously compounded interest formula. Be aware of that. Highly suggest you take a look at continuously compounded interest formula, and you'll see that it's slightly different, and it occurs a little bit quicker in many cases. But just for reference, so something to be aware. In this case, it's a good thing because you're investing it. So there is our expected investment worth after 8 years.